You're listening to the WholeHog Football Podcast, sponsored by Bud Anderson Home Services. Every Monday through Friday during the Razorbacks football training camp, bringing you the latest news, position analysis, and more. Here's your hosts, Matt Jones and Scotty Bordelon.
The Razorbacks are switching things up a little bit this week. They're going through morning practices. Sam Pittman said that he didn't really like how his team handled early games last year, that he thought they started slow. And so one of the priorities this week for the Razorbacks is to go through those morning practices, give the team a little bit of an idea of what it feels like to get ready for an early game. You know, get ready for an early practice. You still got to do some of the same things in terms of your team meetings and your pre-practice meals and things of that nature. And so today, Wednesday, is the first of 3 consecutive days that the Razorbacks are going through morning practice. And that's going to change up the schedule of our podcast just a little bit due to the fact that we're out there covering the practice. Our podcast is going to be released a couple of hours later over the next few days than it typically has been to this point. I'm joined today by Dudley Dawson of Hogs Illustrated and Scotty Bordelon of WholeHogSports.com. And Scotty just got off the practice field. Scotty, what were some of the things that you took away from watching practice, not only today, but we haven't had a chance to talk since practice yesterday as well?
Yeah, so running back is an area that I don't know if concern is the right word right now, because we don't just have a ton of information on what's going on there. But Traylon Smith has not been at practice we haven't seen him in the open portion of practice the first 3 days since Arkansas's first scrimmage on Saturday. And AJ Green has also he's not been, with the running backs group this week. You saw him a couple of days earlier in the week. He was, he's in shorts and a jersey, but he wasn't in pads. He didn't have a helmet. So something to definitely keep an eye on there. And yesterday I saw Josh Oglesby. The running backs were going through a pass protection type drill, and it looked like he was going through, he was, having quite a bit of pain in one of his feet, which is not ideal considering that, he injured one of his feet in fall camp last year and it held him out of the season. They probably could have used him in some areas, especially giving Traylon Smith a little bit of a breather here and there. But Josh Oglesby was back today. He looked to be full go. And then Dion Edwards was another guy that we hadn't seen the first couple of days of the week since the first scrimmage. He was back today. He was running with the third team at linebacker alongside Jackson Woodard. I didn't think the receivers had a great day today in terms of they looked fine during the fastball start that I really like to watch. Gets the guys' blood flowing immediately. They get 4 each of the first 3 teams get 4 plays. But I just saw with quarterbacks throwing to receivers on air, there's too many balls on the ground. I think we counted at least 5, maybe 6 drops. And that's that's with no DBs out there. So some of that stuff's got to really get cleaned up.
Dudley, another thing that we've seen at tight end this week, and I think it might have been caused because of what we've seen at running back and Dominic Johnson having to go back to running back, is that we've seen Landon Rogers, the freshman quarterback from Little Rock Parkview. He's gone in and played tight end for at least the last couple of days in practice. And this is something that I think we're seeing more when you've got these big body tight ends who also have a little bit of a running ability. I mean, think about Tim Tebow. He just, went through training camp with the Jaguars as a tight end. I think you're seeing this maybe a little bit more with quarterbacks, that's a position where they can go play. Your thoughts on Landon Rogers playing tight end, though, and what this might mean for him and for his future?
Well, the first thing I think, obviously, it's not a necessity moving somebody there. You've got to, whether it was Johnson or Landon Rogers, whoever, after Levi Draper, got hurt and wasn't able to go through, you have to have some numbers there. Now, in terms of his athletic ability, I think Landon is a fantastic athlete. In fact, I think he certainly passed the ball well last year in high school for Little Rock Parkview, but I think he was viewed as more of a runner. And so him in open space with the ball in his hands, I think could work. Now, obviously, he's got a lot to work on because he spent the last few years at quarterback, and now we'll have to learn the intricacies of being a tight end. But I do think there are some areas that you can get him the ball, and he'll make plays in in space. Will they need to get to him this season as they go along? That with the way injuries are going in camp, you know, that may be the case, but you've got to have the numbers there because you just got to be ready for any situation. You know, he's not the Little Rock Parkview tight end that I expected to be there and contributing this year. That would be Aaron Outley, but Aaron obviously cannot push through the injury that he's got, and from all indications is going to redshirt this year. So Landon Rogers, who was not going to see snaps at quarterback without a rash of injuries, you know, at least is in a position to maybe help them out. You know, if it gets to the point, and tight end and running back, you know, right now are the two. You know, I think there's some talent there, but at the same time, they've got to practice, and they're at a time right now during this preseason practice where, you know, I think it's accurate to say it's the boredom has set in a little bit. They're excited to get out there, excited to get to the game. You're right in the middle here, and so you're just trying to push through, much like you do the middle of a Major League Baseball season.
And with Rogers, it felt like he was, you know, behind the eight ball because he didn't come and go through spring practice like Lucas Coley did. And, you know, in every conversation that we've had about quarterbacks and that the coaches have had about quarterbacks, there have been 5 quarterbacks that have been mentioned ahead of him. And so this is a way that he could potentially get on the field. And you've got the 4-game redshirt rule. There's a lot of different things that could play into his favor by being a tight end. But the big one is that Arkansas gets another body in the tight end room for the time being. Scotty, I thought another big note that I saw out of practice today is that Ricky Stromberg's back.
Yeah, Ricky Stromberg got back to practice on Tuesday. He was in a green jersey, and today he was in a green jersey again. He's not, you know, figured into the fastball start or anything like that to this point. I think they're going to, you know, be really, really cautious with him because that's a guy that maybe if Myron Cunningham's not your captain on the offensive line, it's probably Ricky. I mean, he's one of your more experienced guys. And Sam Pittman and Cody Kennedy both said he might actually be your best offensive lineman. They're not going to take any chances with him. But I think it was a good sign that he got back this week. And, you know, after the scrimmage on Saturday, Sam Pittman was asked about Stromberg and when he might start factoring in. And they said that they would kind of be shocked if he wasn't back for that scrimmage. I just don't think that they're going to push it with him. But it's good that he's back, you know, getting some reps and kind of getting back into the swing of things. The big thing with him right now is Cody Kennedy said they're sharpening the blade with him mentally. So they're kind of trying to make up a little bit of a lost time with him.
Scotty, going back to Tuesday's practice, one of the things that I thought was notable and I've heard some people talking about is the fact that Art Briles was there. It's not the first time that he's been at an Arkansas practice. Of course, his son is Kendall Briles, the offensive coordinator. What did you see from him in terms of what he was working with in the time that you were able to watch?
Yeah, I'm not exactly positive what all he was there for, but you know, when Arkansas went through its fastball start, he was watching very intently. And then once the quarterbacks moved outdoors onto the grass field outside, you know, he was kind of monitoring the quarterbacks group when they threw to receivers on air. So I think he's just kind of monitoring, and obviously Kendall being over there, you know, he could probably, you know, maybe give him a tip on here and there on what he's seeing with KJ Jefferson and some of the guys that are battling for maybe that number 2 spot, but most definitely that number 3. I just always, you know, regardless of what you think about him, he's got some football knowledge, and Kendall's probably not going to be hesitant to ask him for some of that.
Dudley, this is something, you know, in all the years that you've watched practice, and I've seen it going back to Houston Nutt and Bobby Petrino and Brett Bielema, bringing coaches in like this for a day at practice is a way I think they feel like they can really gain some insight without that. I guess what I'm saying is there's not a lot of commitment there. You bring them in for one day, you get their insight, and away they go.
Yeah, and I think that's a key thing, you know, insight. And certainly Kendall was going to be talking to his dad one way or the other, you know, whether he was at practice or not. And I'm sure he'll be able to get some things that will help Arkansas out. The one thing I would say about that, and I'm very strong in my feeling on this, I know that Art Briles was not, basically guilty of anything as far as the NCAA. But I do not think the optics of that situation are great. And if, there have been rumors, and you deal with rumors on maybe he would come on as a consultant for Arkansas, I do not think that would be a great deal at all. It's something that, I may get in trouble for saying it, but I just don't think it's a good look. And I don't think that's something Arkansas should do. Back to that, though, I do think that certainly he has a great offensive mind, and I would suspect that that Kendall and would get as much information from his dad as he could. I would still do the same thing if I was in that situation. I'm very strong about the optics of him not coming here and being a consultant or being employed by the University of Arkansas.
Scotty, I wanted to go back to the fastball starts that you've talked about. From what I've been able to read, and I haven't been there, you have been, but that Treylon Burks doesn't go through those, or he hasn't gone through the last couple of days. Maybe he hasn't gone through some going back to last week. Do you get the sense that maybe with Burks, they know what they have with him, and that they're at the point where, I guess the NBA term is load management, right? I think LeBron made that popular. Are they at that point with Treylon Burks that he's now just kind of not sitting out, but that he's maybe not having to go through as much as other players are?
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. I mean, nobody's going to argue that Treylon Burks is bona fide like he does. I don't think he really has to prove anything else to the Arkansas's coaches. And what it also does, when Treylon Burks is off the field, it gives somebody else an opportunity. And you don't have any questions, I don't think, about Treylon Burks going into this season, but there are questions about, maybe who can give him some breathing room, who can attract some attention away. And I think it gives guys like Kendall Catalon, Keytron Jackson, Jaquaylin Crawford, guys like that. Jaquaylin Crawford's been running with the first team in those fastball starts pretty regularly, lately. And so I think there might be something there with him. He might be showing out for the coaches, and he might be a valuable asset for them. We know he's got speed. The only question I would have with him would be his hands. And then Tyson Morris, he's another guy that he's an older guy that we've seen some flashes from in the past. I think he's got pretty good hands. He made 2 great catches today when quarterbacks were throwing to receivers on air. He wasn't one of the guys that had drops. He had to go full extension above his head for a catch, made it look easy. And then he went down below his knees on a pass that KJ threw to him. So I think, you don't have to worry about Treylon Burks whatsoever, in my opinion. And if anything else, it's just given some guys that, are battling for playing time, maybe in that top 8 in the receiver rotation to, go get some reps.
Probably the worst thing, you've seen this in practice, I think back to Niall Davis about 10 years ago, is, you put your stud out there and they get injured, and it can really change the complexion of a football season.
Yeah, and it's a slippery slope there, because you want your guys to be ready to be secure with the football after getting hit, or you want them to be able to wrap up in tackles. So it's changed a lot from back in the day when you would go through and everybody would just get a lot of physical practices, and you just kind of imagine things. Treylon Burks is, obviously we know, like Scott said, you're getting from him, but I think it's probably a good thing when you have superstars, and let's be honest, he's a superstar. Get him to that game. He's as important or more important than getting the quarterbacks to the game. In terms of how they're practicing and everything. So I think that's a pretty smart indication there. But also I think it's big to get some physicality in there. And I think they're trying to do that a little bit, but it's just balanced by, caution and just wanting to get to the starting line, I guess it is.
WholeHog Football Podcast is brought to you by Bud Anderson Home Services. Each day this week, we will continue our position analysis. And today it's the offensive line. Cody Kennedy is the first-year offensive line coach at Arkansas, and he met with the media yesterday. Here were some highlights from what he had to say.
Yeah, a lot of starts in that room, a lot of maturity, a lot of guys that have seen, the ups and the trends of this program. They've heard from a lot of different coaches, So just speaking their language and working on that, building our calls, different things up front. It's easier when you have those guys who have experienced change before. And you got a lot of starts in there, the Cunninghams, the Wagners, the Clarys, there's been Strombergs, there's guys that been in a lot of games, a lot of snaps. And that experience just breeds confidence, and they're able to see those situations that arise almost before they do it. And it's a lot of fun coaching them. We've got a great room right there, and I wake up every day blessed to be here, blessed to be coaching them.
How many offensive linemen in a perfect world in a game do you like to play?
I think you got to get the best 5 out there to start, but everybody in the country is looking for 10 really, really good offensive linemen. There's not a program in the country that is just overrun with great offensive linemen. That's why recruiting is huge. But also, as far as my personal philosophy, I think you've got to have guys that you trust on that second wave, about 8 guys that if something happens, in a game, you can't control the variables that are out there. If something happens, I don't want my heart rate to go up because somebody's out there. So we're working every day with combo line, what we call combo lines in practice, where we're mixing up guys where, hey, if XYZ goes down, who's going in? Okay, he may play right tackle right now. He may move to left guard. And it really helps the kids with confidence too. Because if you get throughout the season and there's some of those circumstances that come up, the kids aren't doubting themselves. They've been in that situation in practice. So I'd say you got to have 8 solid ones that you believe in, but heck, everybody in the country will take 10 to 12 for sure.
Cody Kennedy is a former graduate assistant under Sam Pittman at Georgia. And while they might have, similar ideas about how they coach the offensive line, I think their personalities are a world apart. Sam Pittman, more of a quiet, reserved type. You can't say that about Cody Kennedy after listening to him yesterday. Scotty, one of the big deals on the offensive line, though, right now is the battle at left guard between Brady Latham and Luke Jones. What have you seen between those two at camp so far?
Yeah, it's interesting. That was the thing that I wanted to know and get some more information from Cody Kennedy on Tuesday. And, we've gotten to see, I would say quite a bit of live teamwork, I think since, maybe day 4 and the last 5 days, including today, that we've seen that Brady Latham has been the number 1 left guard. And so there might be, Cody Kennedy's obviously said that competition with him and Luke Jones is going to come down to the wire, but Brady Latham might be grabbing a hold of that thing. And Latham started all 10 games at left guard last season. He was one of 2 linemen to start all 10 games, and the other one was Myron Cunningham. So that continuity could, you always like to have guys who have played next to each other for extended time, and Myron and Brady Latham, they certainly fit that. Brady was characterized, I think, by Dalton Wagner and Ty Clary as a violent guy. Cody Kennedy said that, he's really, really physical. Luke Jones is going to give you a little bit of a bigger guy. I think he's up 16 pounds over last year. Brady Latham, I think, is in the ballpark of 8 to 10 pounds. Both of those guys have really good size. I would just say right now, I think Latham probably has the leg up. He's just been running with the first team more from what we've seen, but that is a very important, underrated, not very talked about position battle that, that's going to determine a lot of what Arkansas's offensive line looks like and how they can run and, obviously protect KJ too.
And I thought it was interesting to hear Kennedy kind of allude to the fact that they both came out of great high school programs. Jones out of Pulaski Academy, played for Kevin Kelly there. Latham out of Jinx, Oklahoma, played for the late Alan Trimble, the great coach, one of the great coaches in the history of Oklahoma high school football. I want to go back, Scotty, to center and what you've seen from Ty Clary. The thought is that whenever Ricky Stromberg is able to come back, and I know the hope is that he'll be back and able to play for the Rice game in a couple of weeks, that Clary will move back over to right guard. But what have you seen him from center? Because I know there's a lot of intrigue there with, you've heard people over the last couple of years talk about his snaps and how the snaps aren't crisp enough and how, that has affected the offense. What have you seen from him playing center? And also, what have you seen from his backup, Beau Limmer, working with the right team or the first team right guard?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question if Ricky Stromberg is healthy that Ty is going to slide back over to right guard. And that gives you your best look at offensive line. And I think you mentioned it maybe it was late last week or maybe earlier this week, after, when we were talking about Stromberg's injury. That is obviously their best look. And Clary and Dalton Wagner have played alongside each other quite a bit at right guard and right tackle. So there's some more continuity there. So it's not really a surprise that, your best look would be with Clary at right guard. But I think, when Clary did slide over to center with Stromberg out, it sounds like, he struggled a little bit with consistency with his snapping those first couple of days. And then Cody Kennedy said it's kind of like he, maybe flipped a little bit of a switch and, he, got comfortable again. I think Beau Limmer's coming along fine. He was another guy that I was really intrigued by in fall camp last year, just because they said he had a mean streak, and Sam Pittman likes some guys that have some mean streaks. And I think, you're probably not going to get on the field unless you got a little bit of that. So you feel pretty good about the continuity on the left side, possibly with Latham and Cunningham. And if Stromberg comes back healthy, Clary gives him a good look at right guard. And then him and Dalton Wagner seem to have pretty good chemistry on that right side. They came into the interview room and they were riffing off each other, as well as any two guys that we've had come in camp. And, they said part of that is because they communicate a lot. They've communicated a lot on the right side of that line. So offensive line I think it's coming along pretty well. We just, we haven't seen just extended work, and just to see how, they've improved with their, their blocking in the run game and how they're protecting KJ. But I think this offensive line's, going to be an upgrade from last year. And I think you'll probably see the rush yards per attempt go up, and maybe the sack numbers come down. That's going to be really important.
Dudley, it's interesting to me because the offensive linemen who we're talking about a lot right now, Stromberg, Latham, Beau Limmer, they all came in the same signing class for Dustin Fry to play a different style of offensive line. And they seem like they've really taken to Sam Pittman. It's interesting, though, that these guys were brought in to play a completely different way, where they like their offensive linemen a little bit more trim, obviously to try and move faster. They're still trying to play at a fast pace, but they want their offensive linemen to look and play a different way than the previous staff.
Yeah, and I think that's a very key note that you made. They have adjusted, and I think they're doing what they want. I'm a big fan of Law and Order on TV, but I heard the word violence and violent more yesterday at the press conference than I would in any one of those episodes. And I think that is a mindset that Coach Pittman and now Coach Kennedy have really tried to get across. Clary and Wagner looked like two guys from an 80s hair band in there yesterday, with the one with the flowing hair and the other with some kind of look. I'm not sure what that was.
Yeah, definitely a mullet. He got a little upset that Tom kind of bashed his mullet.
Yeah, but I do think that certainly they have adapted, and I think we're seeing that Coach Kennedy is an extension of just what Coach Pittman wants, and it would appear that that was going to be an offensive line in coach in waiting if Brad Davis, were ever not with the program. And obviously he's moved to LSU. But I do think that the chemistry with those guys, the experience that they've had, and the tutelage of Coach Pittman and Coach Kennedy are all kind of messing together. Now it's going to take, going out against Rice and Texas to get anybody to get totally on board and believe that the offensive line is much better than it was last season. But boy, the potential is sure there, and they're sure talking the right stuff.
And we've talked throughout the preseason about, with so many starters back, that a lot of the focus this year is on backups and maybe battles for number 2 positions. And Scotty, one that I think is kind of intriguing is at right tackle, where it seems like Marcus Henderson and Tykees Crawford are going back and forth. And I know they haven't given Dalton Wagner the starting job at right tackle either, but it seems like it's Henderson and Crawford really battling for that number 2 spot.
Yeah, I would think you're right there. It's important, very, very important, to have a number 2 and a number 3 ready to go at the tackle spots. I mean, those are on the left side, that's your quarterback's blind side more often than not. And then the right side is just, especially with a guy like Dalton Wagner, he's got so much experience, and it feels like he's been here forever. But that's a guy that's has been a little bit injury prone in the past, and he's still wearing that tan wrap on his lower back. So you're kind of wondering if he's 100% with that back. But if he's not, Tycase Crawford, I think he's a kid that's coming on in camp. And after the first scrimmage last Saturday, Sam Pittman said that, he thinks Crawford is going to find himself in that 2 deep. And today he was. Crawford might have surpassed Marcus Henderson at number 2 right tackle, just because Henderson, I think, coming out of the scrimmage, he was in a green jersey earlier this week, and apparently Crawford's making a push. So you've got some, I think, really good options at right tackle. But you're right, like most of the talk on the offensive line outside of left guard has mostly just been about backups. And Beau Limmer, I think, is, like I said earlier, he's a really good number 2 option at right guard. I think Shane Clennon is a guy that we can, often forget about. He was in the running for, a couple starting jobs, maybe a year or 2 ago. And he's, he could be the backup. He probably, if Stromberg comes back, Clary's obviously moving to right guard. So that probably pushes Clennon to backup center. So I think you've got some good options, all across the board.
We haven't even talked about, Jalen St. John and Ray Curry. Those were highly recruited offensive linemen. Dudley, it feels like this is the first time in several years, maybe since Sam Pittman was the offensive line coach for Beau Limmer, that you feel like there are some true position battles along the offensive line. That's not to say that there haven't been some in the past, but it felt in past years that you kind of knew who the offensive linemen were going to be. And I'm not sure that's quite the case right now.
Right. And I think it's one of those things that here recently, it's been a situation where they got 5 ready to play. Maybe they got 6, and at the most 7. I do think that they're in that 8 to 10 range of people they feel comfortable once everybody comes back, from injury. But the thing, you look at this program, and I'm not surprised, and I know no one else is either, with Coach Pittman, who made it clear when he first came in here, he needed to beef up the lines and needed to get quality on the lines. We're talking about all these guys are here now, and then there's 4 more really good prospects that are going to be offensive linemen in this 2022 signing class. So they're getting to where they need to be in terms of both numbers and talent and where they need to go. And I do think that's been one of the biggest issues with their lack of success over the last few years, is that once upon a time, offensive linemen were big time guys getting things done around here. And then it got into a mix to where there was a gap between talent and numbers. And I think that's going back up now.
Go over to WholeHogSports.com. You can read more from Scotty about the left guard battle between Brady Latham and Luke Jones. And coming Thursday at WholeHogSports.com, we'll have an offensive line position analysis from Tom Murphy. We'll be back with another podcast on Thursday. For Dudley Dawson and Scotty Bordelon, I'm Matt Jones. Have a great day, everyone.
The proceeding has been a production of WholeHogSports.com. Look for our latest podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at WholeHogSports.com for the latest news and commentary.